The sun rose lazily over Ouagadougou, draping the city in a soft, golden hue. Morning chatter filled the markets and cafes, and a gentle breeze stirred the dust along the main boulevards. Among the early risers that day was Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso. Though few would recognize him like this, dressed simply in a weathered jacket, loose shirt, and worn shoes. No motorcade trailed him. No guards in sight. It was how he preferred it. He moved quietly through the streets, greeting vendors, nodding to students, and blending into the living rhythm of his city. Traoré had always believed that true leadership required walking among the people, not above them. That morning, he had a very particular goal. For months, he had been quietly planning a project, a symbolic gesture for the youth of Burkina Faso, the restoration of an iconic vehicle from the country's past, a car that had once belonged to a great revolutionary leader, abandoned and forgotten in a dusty warehouse. He wanted to bring it back to life, not for show, not for prestige, but as a reminder that Burkina Faso's spirit could be reborn from anything, even the forgotten. There was a dealership in the city, known for its rare cars and restoration projects. Quietly and alone, Ibrahim set out to visit it, hoping to find the parts and expertise he needed. When he stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The floor gleamed under the lights. Leather chairs, polished wood panels, the faint scent of imported oils, all carefully curated to cater to wealthy foreigners and a handful of local elites. Employees in sleek uniforms buzzed around customers, wearing gold watches and silk scarves. No one noticed Ibrahim's arrival. Or if they did, they noticed him the wrong way. A simple man. An ordinary man. Someone to ignore. He moved with ease between the shining vehicles, his eyes lighting up when he spotted what he had come for. A vintage Peugeot, dusty but proud in the far corner. Before he could even approach it, a salesman intercepted him, phone in hand, distracted. "Can I help you?" the man said without looking up. "Yes," Ibrahim answered with a calm smile. "I'm interested in that model. May I see it closer?" The salesman barely glanced at him. "Hang on, I'll get someone." And he walked away. Ibrahim waited patiently. Minutes passed. He could hear the soft whispers beginning around him. Who let him in? He doesn't look like he belongs here. Probably lost. He heard it all. He had heard it all his life. But he stayed where he was, studying the car, with a mix of admiration and memory. Meanwhile, the atmosphere thickened, the disdain sharpened, and the storm, though they didn't know it yet, had already begun. Minutes later, the dealership manager emerged from a glass-walled office. Mr. Lemoine, a tall man with slicked back hair, designer shoes, and an expression that had been trained to detect wealth at 50 paces, spotted Ibrahim and frowned. Without asking anyone, without checking a name, he marched over. He stopped 2 paces from Ibrahim, arms crossed over his immaculate suit. "This section is by appointment only, sir," he said sharply, his French-accented tone laced with disdain. Ibrahim smiled politely. "I have time to wait." Lemoyne's nostrils flared. "Perhaps you don't understand. These vehicles are rare, sir. Historic pieces, for serious collectors." "I understand," Ibrahim said, his voice calm as still water. "I am interested in a specific restoration project." The manager looked him up and down. The dusty shoes, the simple jacket, the absence of any visible wealth. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was condescending. "These cars are not for aspirational browsers, monsieur. They are for clients who can meet certain expectations." A small circle of employees had begun to gather near the counter, pretending to work while listening closely. Their snickers were barely concealed. "Perhaps," Ibrahim said quietly, "you should ask who I am before assuming who I am not." Lemoyne chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "I don't need to ask, sir. I can see." The insult hung there in the polished air. Still, Ibrahim didn't raise his voice. He didn't reveal his title. He didn't call security or flash a badge. He simply took one step closer, calm, polite. But now his presence had sharpened into something unmistakable. The air around him grew heavier, thicker, as if even the walls could feel the storm gathering. "And what exactly do you see?" Ibrahim asked, his voice quiet, but carrying a weight that pressed against every ear. Lemoyne smirked without hesitation. "A man wasting my time." And his own. Another employee, a young woman polishing brochures, flinched visibly. She knew, deep in her bones, that something terrible had just happened. But fear chained her silence. Lemoyne, emboldened by his own ignorance, stepped forward. "If you wish to admire the vehicles, sir," he said, his tone thick with condescension, "I suggest you visit our public exhibit next door. It's free." Ibrahim's jaw tightened, a tiny movement, almost invisible, but the shift in the room was seismic. He turned slightly, taking in the showroom. The gleaming glass cases, the polished chrome, the artful lighting, a palace of luxury, built on arrogance, poisoned by entitlement. When he faced Lemoyne again, his voice was no longer just steady, it was surgical. "You speak of price," Ibrahim said, the words cutting through the room like a scalpel. "You speak of exclusivity, of wealth, of things you think make men valuable?" He paused, long enough that even the marble seemed to listen. "No, but you forget the only currency that matters." Lemoyne rolled his eyes, careless. "And what currency would that be, monsieur?" Ibrahim leaned in just slightly, not aggressive, not loud, but with a gravity that made the floor feel smaller. "Respect," he said, the word ringing louder than any shout. The room froze. The young woman polishing brochures dropped her cloth. A client tapping on his phone lowered it without thinking. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to falter. Lemoyne straightened his back, trying to summon authority he no longer had. "I'm afraid you've misunderstood the nature of this place," he sneered. "It's not a charity." "No," Ibrahim replied, and this time his voice didn't slice. It crushed. "It's not." He stepped back, his hands at his sides, utterly composed. And then, with a calmness so cold it burned, he added, "But it is about to become a lesson." He turned toward the exit. And just as the smug smirk began to return to Lemoyne's face, the heavy glass doors flew open with a thunderous crash. Boots struck marble, echoing like gunshots. Men in dark uniforms swept into the dealership. The Presidential Guard of Burkina Faso, unmistakable, unrelenting. Every conversation died mid-syllable. Every movement froze mid-breath. At the head of the formation, a tall officer in full ceremonial dress marched directly toward Ibrahim, a river of force cutting through a sea of shock. The officer stopped, snapped to attention, and saluted. Crisp, absolute. "Monsieur le Président, votre véhicule est prêt." "Mr. President, your vehicle is ready." The silence cracked like a thunderclap. Faces turned ashen. Mouths opened, but no sound came. Phones slipped from stunned fingers. A cup of coffee shattered on the floor somewhere near the back. Lemoyne stumbled back 2 steps, color draining from his face. One of the salesmen dropped his clipboard. The receptionist covered her mouth. Ibrahim Traoré smiled. Small, polite, devastating. "No need for apologies," he said, loud enough for the whole showroom to hear. "Dignity, once denied, is not restored by words, only by deeds." He turned to the officer. "Let's go." The doors stayed wide open as he left, not pushed aside by arrogance, but carried by the true weight of leadership. Behind him, the whispers started, and they would not stop. By the time Ibrahim Traoré's SUV convoy pulled away from the dealership, the first videos were already online. Someone, a young mechanic trainee, had captured everything. The humiliation, the arrogance, the salute, and the quiet, devastating exit. Within an hour, the footage was racing through Ouagadougou's social networks. By noon, it had crossed into Dakar, Abidjan, Bamako, and beyond. By sunset, the world knew. In Burkina Faso, the reaction was electric. TV news anchors interrupted broadcasts. Radio hosts spoke with voices shaking from adrenaline. Crowds gathered in cafes, rewinding the clip over and over on their phones. "That's our president. He walked alone. He stood there while they insulted him. And he didn't even reveal who he was." Young people flooded social media with hashtags. Respect is not optional. President among us, Har, Traoré, walks. With us murals began, appearing overnight on the sides of buildings. A painting of Ibrahim in his simple jacket, standing before luxury cars. One hand tucked in his pocket, the other holding dignity like a torch. At the dealership, chaos reigned. Clients canceled appointments, suppliers froze contracts, politicians issued statements denouncing elitist practices. The dealership's owner, a French businessman named Dufour, called an emergency meeting, voice trembling. "How could you insult the president of Burkina Faso?" Lemoyne tried to defend himself. "He looked ordinary." "He didn't. He didn't announce who he was. Dufour slammed his fist on the table. Exactly. And that's why he's 1,000 times the man you'll ever be. Within hours, Lemoyne was fired publicly. The dealership issued a desperate apology. Too little. Far too late. In Paris, government officials scrambled. The French ambassador in Ouagadougou requested an urgent audience with Traoré's team, terrified that bilateral deals would collapse overnight. In an internal memo leaked to the press, one line stood out. France must realize that old habits of arrogance are no longer tolerated by the new Africa. The memo went viral. It was the beginning of a reckoning long overdue. Meanwhile, Ibrahim Traoré sat at his desk in the modest presidential office, a simple wood-paneled room with an old fan ticking gently overhead. He ignored the avalanche of interview requests. He turned away offers from CNN, BBC, France 24. Instead, he called for a meeting with local youth leaders. When they arrived, nervous, hopeful, he greeted them like brothers and sisters. No throne, he said, no crown, only service. And then together, they began planning something bigger, a national initiative to fund local artisans, mechanics, and dreamers, those who built beauty from dust, without needing a permission slip from privilege. But the fire was not finished yet. Across the Sahel, across West Africa, across the entire global South, something had shifted. An image of Ibrahim Traoré, walking calmly away from the dealership, had become a symbol, not just of pride, not just of leadership, but of a new era. An era where humility crushed arrogance, not with shouting, but with silence, and where respect, once denied, would be reclaimed without asking. Days after the incident, the dealership was a ghost town. The usual hum of business had been replaced with an uneasy, suffocating quiet. The showroom, once polished and bustling, now felt like a relic of another era, an era that had ended the moment Ibrahim Traoré stepped through its doors. The few employees left moved with robotic stiffness, heads down, avoiding the journalists camped outside. No clients came, no deals closed. Inside, Richard Dufour, the French owner, sat in his office clutching a half-drunk cup of cold coffee, staring blankly at the headlines flashing on his laptop. Traoré teaches the world. Respect first. When power walks in silence, a lesson from Burkina Faso. He barely registered the front door's opening. Boots struck the marble again. Calm, measured. The receptionist, visibly shaking, whispered, "He's back." Dufour scrambled to his feet just as Ibrahim Traoré walked through the showroom, alone again, dressed simply, carrying no guards, no cameras, no entourage. Silence rippled through the space. Every remaining employee froze. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Traoré moved straight toward the vintage Peugeot he had admired before, the same dusty, neglected car tucked away in the corner. He placed a hand on its hood, running his fingers slowly across the cool metal. The memory of it, the weight of it, settled into the room. Then he turned and faced them. Richard Dufour hurried forward, voice cracking. "Mr. President, please, allow me to apologize personally. Allow me to—" Ibrahim lifted a hand. Not harshly, simply, calmly. "Respect," he said, his voice filling every corner of the vast hall, "is not given when a title is revealed. It is owed before it is known." Dufour stammered. We deeply regret." He stopped because there was no defense. Traoré walked slowly to the center of the showroom. Everyone watched, not in fear, but in awe. "I came here," Traoré said, "looking not for admiration, not for power, not for attention." He paused. "I came searching for something rare, a piece of our past, a symbol to restore, to remind our people that nothing is too forgotten to be reborn." He touched the hood of the car again. "But what I found here," he continued, voice low but resonant, "was a mirror, a reflection of what must change, not only here, everywhere." The employees shifted uncomfortably. A few lowered their heads. "I forgive the insults," Traoré said, "but forgiveness does not erase consequences." He looked Dufour directly in the eye. "That is why I will not purchase from you, nor will any government contract ever be awarded to this dealership again." The words fell like a gavel. "But there is something you can do," Traore added. Dufour nodded desperately. "Anything, Mr. President." Traore's next words stunned the room. "Donate this car to a local technical school. Let young mechanics restore it. Let it become a project of pride, not a trophy of wealth." Dufour blinked. But the value—" He saw the steely look in Ibrahim's eyes. He swallowed and nodded. "It will be done." Traore smiled, soft, almost sad. "Then perhaps," he said, "out of arrogance, something worthy may still be born." Without another word, he turned and walked back into the sunlight. No fanfare, no anger, just a man, reshaping the world, one silent step at a time. The news of Ibrahim Traoré's return to the dealership, and his decision not to punish, but to transform, hit harder than any sanction or speech could have. It wasn't just a story of humiliation anymore. It became a story of resurrection. Within 24 hours, the vintage Peugeot was towed carefully to Burkina Faso's largest technical institute, the Académie Nationale des Arts et Métiers. Students gathered around it like pilgrims around a sacred relic. Rusty, dusty, imperfect, but now legendary. A giant banner was hung above the entrance gate, handwritten by the students themselves. "This is not just a car. It's a beginning." Ibrahim Traoré didn't attend the ceremony. He didn't need to. His absence spoke louder than any podium speech. He had made his point, and given the future back to the people who would actually build it. Meanwhile, across Burkina Faso, the ripple effects deepened. Markets buzzed with the story. Artisans carved sculptures of Traoré in a simple jacket standing beside the Peugeot. Children reenacted the scene with cardboard cutouts. One child in worn shoes standing proud before rich men in paper suits. Neighborhoods painted murals not of guns or generals, but of respect. Internationally, things were different too. Across Africa, leaders took notice. In Senegal, in Ghana, in Rwanda, politicians suddenly found themselves asked by reporters, "Would you have treated a man like Ibrahim Traoré the same way?" In France, the media was less kind. Editorials blazed with headlines. "The arrogance that backfired." "Burkina Faso's president teaches us all." "Luxury without respect is worth nothing." Airlines, hotels, dealerships, places built on prestige, scrambled to retrain their staff, terrified that the next silent president might already be walking among their guests. One Parisian newspaper summed it best. "The age of colonial arrogance has expired. A new world has entered the room, and it wears worn shoes." Back home, Ibrahim Traoré continued working quietly. He launched a national initiative called Respect First, a sweeping program requiring businesses, government offices, schools, and even international partners to undergo new ethics training. Lesson 1. Treat every person with dignity before you know their title. He refused to let the dealership incident be an isolated scandal. He turned it into a seed. Within 6 months, a visible change was underway in Burkina Faso. Customer service industries were reforming. Local artisans gained direct government funding. Schools introduced new curriculums about respect and service. It wasn't about catching bad actors anymore. It was about changing a mindset. But not everyone embraced it. Behind closed doors, old power circles whispered, "He's dangerous. He's humiliating us internationally. He must be taught a lesson." Threats crept in. Veiled and silent, an anonymous letter arrived at the palace gate one night. "Watch your steps, Mr. President. Humility may inspire the poor, but it threatens the powerful." The head of security, Captain Konate, brought the letter to Traoré's desk. Ibrahim read it once, folded it calmly, and set it on fire with a matchstick. As the paper curled into black ash, he spoke without looking up. "Let them threaten. We will answer with roads, with schools, with dignity. Let them scream in the dark. We will build in the light." Konate nodded grimly. He knew the president wasn't naive. He knew they were marching into deeper waters. But he also knew Ibrahim Traoré didn't retreat. And then, the final blow. 6 months after the dealership incident, at a massive international summit hosted in Accra, Ibrahim was scheduled to speak. The summit hall glittered with world leaders, billionaires, diplomats. The same elites who once would have sneered at a man in worn shoes. When Traoré was introduced, there was polite applause. He walked to the podium. No entourage. No golden chains, no medals. Just him in his simple jacket, calm as a rising tide. He stood before the world, paused, and said, "The day you judge a man by his clothes, you lose the right to lead him. The day you judge a woman by her wealth, you lose the right to ask for her loyalty. And the day you judge a people by their poverty, you lose the right to claim their future." He let the silence stretch, soaking into every heart. Then he finished. "Africa's dignity is not for sale, not anymore, not ever again." He stepped down without waiting for applause. But the room rose anyway. First one table, then another, then all. A standing ovation thundered through the hall, not out of obligation, not out of tradition, but because something inside everyone, even the skeptics, had shifted. Ibrahim Traoré had not shouted. He had not threatened. He had simply walked into the world wearing dignity like a shield, and left the world scrambling to catch up.